welcome to my next brain trust conversation. I'm Jane Carter from Jane Carter Coaching. I help sensitive, deep feeling, yet very ambitious solopreneurs to have more fun and freedom and money in their businesses. And this brain trust series is where I'm gathering people who have either helped me, they're part of my brain trust, my gathering of wise helpers. They've helped me in my business, and or I think they can help you in your business. And today I'm talking to the amazing Smartello, Michelle Martello, who I found through Laura Belgray. She's also worked with Marie Forleo, with MTV, the National Park Service, all kinds of amazing luminaries. She does incredible work. She's an award-winning designer, digital strategist, and founder of Minima Designs. Michelle, thank you so much for being here.
Oh, thank you for having me. It's such a delight to, well, see you in the virtual world as we will. So,
Yeah, we always have so much fun hanging out. And tell me, is there anything that you want to add to that intro that
Mm.
I left out? I know that I left out a lot, but
Yeah, so I've been in the digital space for over 20 years at this point. I started as a web designer and have just gone down a whole different rabbit hole of, helping folks with their online business. And now I really help folks create and craft their digital products, think about their revenue streams. I also mentor web designers, but really giving people the help and kind of the third eye view of, you know, if we're looking at stuff like what do you want to create, and it's not necessarily so much about revenue generation, which of course we want, but also what are you going to be satisfied creating, what's going to creatively fulfill you, and making your impact in the world with something that you're really proud of. So that's what I really enjoy helping people kind of sort through. I love ideation, I love consulting, I love helping people kind of just figure stuff out, because if I'm not involved in the making of it, I can really help you get perspective on like, what's it going to take to actually get this done? And is it a road you want to go down?
yes, I love your. I mean, you are a wealth of all kinds of technical information, truly. But I love your big picture perspective,
Mm.
which is one reason I'm excited you're here. And I want to ask, right before we started this, we were just having some conversation about, oh, I wish back in my 30s I'd been more of a go-getter.
Yeah.
We're as we're in midlife, we're encountering things that we wish we'd known back
Mm.
then. And uh, as you think back to when you were first getting started and all the things that you've learned, what are some things that you wish you could say to your kind of baby
Mm.
solopreneur self, uh,
Yeah.
when you were first starting out?
Yeah, it was interesting, in preparation for this, you had one question, this question, and it what really struck me is that, like I said, I've been in business. My business actually is 18 years old at this point, which is wild to me. It's a fully fledged adult, and if I look back, and I will tell you, in my early 30s, I worked with a friend who was considered a friend at the time, and this is something a lot of us run into. We bend over backwards. We don't charge them enough. We want to help them out. And this particular person really screwed me over. She
Mm,
actually told people not to work with me. She didn't pay me for 2 years. And it literally was like the most nominal of amounts.
yeah.
And it really messed with my psyche. And,
Mhm.
because she was like vocal about stuff, it really made
Yeah.
me limit my visibility. And that's probably one of my biggest regrets is I let this one person have a hold over me almost for a decade, if you can believe it. And so it really tripped up with my head. And so I didn't do video, I didn't do interviews, I didn't put myself out there because this other person was kind of out there. And I couldn't handle, because I'm very much like an introverted extrovert, right? I know we talk about this a lot, but I couldn't handle the backlash. And that's one thing now I think people have to deal with more than when I got started. Because when I got started, we didn't have social media. And now it's so easy to like, lambast somebody or talk about something or like I had this experience or whatever else.
Yeah.
And there's always three sides. And this really is probably my biggest regret of my career is that there's so much inaction that I didn't take. And also I let this person live in my head rent free for so long that I didn't put myself out there. And, I think about like, oh my God, I wasted so much time worrying about this other person. It's just like I worried about this person so much. And, I let that kind of trip me up for so long. And so if that's the one thing I can advise folks is like, it's so easy to fall down this comparison rabbit hole. And I don't care if you're making 6 figures, 7 figures. Like I have clients who are making buckets of money and they're still tripped up about what other people are doing. They're like, well, this person's doing this. And I'm like, you have the perfect setup. Do not rock the boat. And I talk to folks and I'm just like, we always want what someone else has, but you have no idea what they're dealing with. You have no idea until and I've been on some I've been on teams of like 50 people, 100 people, and it's a mess.
Yeah.
And so that's helped me
That's a
clarify
thing.
also. Yeah, it's also helped clarify for me what I don't want to do when I see these teams. And even my initial working life, I was a software developer and I worked on a very small team of like 7, 8 people. And there were times when they didn't pay themselves because they had to pay us. They were waiting for, and like, I'm like, I learned so much about like, ooh, I don't want to go down and be so beholden to like one person or one client because that could put you in a really tenuous space.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've seen, that's interesting that like you've sort of absorbed others' mistakes,
Mhm.
seeing their mistakes and pitfalls that could really lead to being in deep doo doo later on.
Yeah.
Um, that story about this one person living rent free in your head and that holding you back from showing up in all the ways that you probably would have shown up.
Yeah.
I'm really struck by kind of it sounds like a deeper message to that is like, don't just give away your power,
Mm.
right? I that's me. I don't know. Maybe that's a weird summary of it, but I just think it sounds like you handed this person a lot of power to define you and to have to kind of prove yourself against them, and you've really realized, oh no, I knew I had it. I had it.
Yeah. It's hard too when you're working with friends. I've had a couple incidents
Oh
where
yeah,
friends were like, I want to give them the world. Now I charge my friends. Like I may not charge them the same amount,
yeah,
but there is something about not charging or them not showing up in a certain way. Like I had a great friend and you know, this is a different person and she was like, well, why can't you do for me what you do for this other client of mine? I'm like, well, she's not afraid to market herself. She's not afraid to put herself out there. Like there's only so much I can do on my end as a service provider or as a consultant. Like you also have to be willing to show up. Everyone, often it's just like, I just want everybody to do it for me. I mean, this is another thing. Like you would ask, like, what's a mistake that you see people
yeah.
making while they're thinking they're doing the right thing? And one thing I especially see in the online space is like people are taking action based on what they think other people are doing. Right. So they're like, well, they're doing this, so I need to do this. And I'm like, you may not have the team, the finances, the resources. It may not actually also be working well. Someone can be writing about something. And what's interesting is a year later, they'll be like, oh, I tried this and it totally failed. And so you're following a path that may not be the right one for you and may not even be working. I see people hiring without knowing what they specifically need. So like their particular outcomes, their goals. I saw this more, when I was a web designer, because they'd be like, oh, I want you to create this thing that you created for somebody else. And I'm like, well, you don't have that business or support or all these things, they'd want me to replicate. And so I see that a lot is where people are like, well, to do exactly what you did for this person. I'm like, that's not going to really work for you. And I see this a lot. I see it a lot with social media. I have clients who are like, oh, I just need to be on social media. I just want to hand it off to somebody. And I'm like, but you're not giving them goals or targets to reach, KPIs. And then they hire the cheapest people because they want to spend $200 a month. And so or sometimes they get screwed. I've had clients get screwed over to the tune of like 5 or 10K a month because they're hiring a marketing firm. But if you're not going in with a specific goal or strategy, and I'm not saying you've got to come up with it, but you should have an idea of like, I'm hiring you because I want this outcome. And then we get folks who are posting with no goal and it's like, whatever. And it's just like, I had a client recently he just hates social media and he's been fighting it for a decade. And I'm like, listen, dude, you don't want to do it. You don't have to. You have to find some other growth channel, And he's like, well, I hired somebody, whatever. And I'm like, this is the most random posting, and it's not effective. And he's like, well, I don't want to do it. So you're putting up these
So
roadblocks,
done
right?
that. I'm just so
Right. Cause you're like, I feel like I have to do it. Everybody else is saying I have to do it, blah, 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 but I don't want to do it. So I'm just going to outsource this. And so again,
yeah.
that's another thing of like, if you aren't taking your own power, I'm not saying you've got to do all of it, but I think there's real value in doing a lot of your business activities
Oh
yourself
yeah.
first and then hiring out for it, because then you're going to have an understanding of how long does it take. I mean,
Yeah.
I remember I tried to hire a designer many years ago, and I did a test, and I was like, I just need you to resize like 10 photos. Honestly, should have taken maybe 10 minutes max, maybe. It took
Mhm.
her 2.5 hours. And I was like, that's a clue that you have no idea what you're doing.
Yeah.
Right. So you need to devise tests. You need to have an understanding, a basic level understanding of like, what is it you need done? I'm not saying you got to code the back end of your stuff, but, I think oftentimes people are afraid of tech, or they're afraid of a business, something or other. And they're like, I'm just going to hire an expert. And, even if you've somewhat vetted somebody, you don't know necessarily what they're going to do for you until you actually see them produce a result.
Yeah, yeah, that's so wise. And I see a lot of solopreneurs kind of, I do this physical thing of like, just take it, just take
Yeah.
it,
Yeah.
right? Like, just make this or replicate that person's. And as you're saying, you have to have yourself in it.
Yeah.
I mean, and specifically, here are the goals. When I first started doing social media, I was like, well, everyone doesn't have to post. So I just started posting the most, I still sometimes post the most,
I, I mean,
you know?
it's like pulling teeth. It really is. I get it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so,
Yeah.
and at some point I was able to go, okay, here's where I'm trying to go with this and get some help with that. Um, but it's so tempting to exit our business before it's even started, right? And just
Mhm.
hand it off. Just you take it.
Mhm.
And when I work with people, it's really like, let's form your message. Let's know what your why is. Let's know what your actual goals are. And I know that you're really good with that too, of helping
Yeah.
people know, okay, let's specifically know what is it we're trying to make happen here.
Yeah. Well, and I'm not afraid to say, like, there's a lot of activities you don't need to be doing. If
Mm,
you don't want to be on Twitter, you don't want to be on, or X or whatever, you don't want to be on, whatever. Where, this is the other mistake I see is like, people are doing stuff without any data or information. They're just randomly, and I think people are scared of math, or they're scared of data. And listen, I'm an art history major. Like, I'm like, but you have to get comfortable of like, well, I need to make a certain amount of money. I need how many clients to get there, or I need to have how many projects. And if we don't have that baseline understanding, then we're not able to create a plan and a strategy about how we're going to acquire those clients, or retain those clients, or come up with new projects or packages, things like that. And it's always fascinating to me. I mentored web designers for so many years, and so many of them would be like, oh, it's just so hard to get clients. And I'm like, I'm tripping over myself. I have so many. And I'm like, if you just put forth literally the smallest modicum of effort with a lot of this stuff, it isn't that hard. But we're so distracted by like, well, I need to post a reel about this. And I'm like, is your client coming to you because of like some funny reel you made, or is it, or do you just frankly need to work your referral network, or do you need to like go speak in front of an audience, or do you need to go do something else to pick up a few new clients?
mhm,
Yeah.
mhm. I think about those early days of reels where people were pointing at the text
Yeah.
and half the people looked so uncomfortable, like, uh, uh,
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
and who definitely didn't have any rhythm. But it was sort of like, I was like, oh, you don't have to do that,
You
right?
don't have to do it. Yeah. I will say though, kudos to anybody who's willing to experiment, because that's the other thing. Like, I'm about ready, I think, to completely pivot my business into more of an AI direction, because what I'm seeing happening, my husband and I just went to a conference, and we're like, most of the people in this audience will not have a job in the next 3 years. So you have to also be willing to be like, you know what? This maybe isn't working. And again, this is why knowing your numbers and data, if you start to see, and I've got a few clients right now, they're like, my inquiries are going down. There's a lot of, in fact, one's a therapist, and like, my inquiries are going down, things are happening. And I'm like, well, what's going on in the marketplace? Right. And so if you are not willing to evaluate that and adjust what you're doing to temper it, to change it, like, you could be out of a job. I mean, I had a friend, I used to, when I first started my business, this is back like almost 20 years ago, I was a subcontractor for him. He would bring in huge clients. That's how I got to work with MTV and some other big
Mhm,
clients. I
mhm.
was his subcontractor, and he was doing great. And then 2008 hit, which was great, the economic downturn. And 2008 hit, and he wasn't changing how he was designing or coding or approaching anything. And like every single thing he'd created looked exactly the same. And I'm like, this is going to be a problem. And the only reason he was afloat is because I was doing a lot of additional design work for him that looked different. And he ended up having to close his business and going back to work for the government because he just couldn't wrap his head around how he needed to change. And
Wow.
so that's something we also have to be aware of. It's just like, we're seeing another revolution happening right now. And if you are not willing to pull your head out of the sand, you can get passed by.
Yeah. Oh, and
Mhm.
it's so tempting, isn't it?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
That actually, I
La
want
la la la. Yeah. Yeah.
actually, I want to pounce on that really quickly
Yeah.
because I know obviously like there are whole conferences about AI and
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
and that kind of thing. But I'm thinking like, what's the mistake you see people making? I mean, it sounds like putting your head in the sand is probably the biggest mistake you can make right now. On the flip side of that, do you have maybe a nugget or a baby step that
Mm.
those of us who are a little bit
Yeah.
tech people
Yeah.
um, could take to start feeling like to get our heads out of the sand and start feeling more comfortable with, okay, I might have to adjust.
Yeah. We talk a lot about growth and scaling, all the rest of it. Personally, I love to run a small, lean business.
Mhm.
And one thing I think everybody can look at is like, well, what are these daily tasks, grunt tasks, weekly tasks that we do? Is it making, a CRM of our clients? Is it writing content? Is it, developing new ideas? A lot of this stuff can be streamlined, simplified, expedited by using an AI tool. And AI now is going to get baked into everything, by the way. Right now, we're using some disparate
Seeing
kind of
it.
things, but it's literally getting baked into everything we do. And so I just think there's some, in fact, even our newest phones and our newest computers, there's new chips being developed or going to be out there because you're going to be able to have to run all these things and process all these things. And so, again, just being aware you may need to update your equipment. I would get comfortable with a couple of these tools, whether it's Chat GPT or Claude or some of these. Just try them out. Like it's not about being scared. It's using it as your co-pilot, right? It's using it as an assistant. So what we used to maybe outsource to a virtual assistant, a lot of this stuff can come in-house now, which means maybe those virtual assistants could be hired for higher level tasks, maybe higher touch tasks.
Yeah.
Maybe it's following up personally with clients or it's doing more revenue generating activities, but the grunt work we can automate. And so that's where I would take an evaluation of maybe over the course of the next week or two, just note what are all the little tasks that you're doing on a regular basis. I will tell you web design is going to be fairly automated in the next couple of years. Like
Oh,
literally click point, got a website. It's going to be like that. And so things that used to take us 20, 40, 80, 100 hours, it's going to revolutionize everything.
wow. Ooh, okay.
I know. Yeah.
But again, this is so helpful because
Mhm.
I mean, I know I and others like me are I tend to be a lurker where I sort of observe where it's going before I'll
Sure.
try out any technology. And I'm always on the kind of the tail end of I
Yeah.
mean, I got my iPhone after everyone already had one. I'm like, okay, it's safe to go in the water. Um, and so it's helpful just to be reminded, like, hey, this doesn't have to be scary. Just go ahead and start being playful with it.
Yeah. And in fact, you're not as far behind as you think. So if you've even heard of AI or even tried one of these tools, you're still on that early adopter phase. We're kind of biased because we're in the online marketing space. But if you go into like, John Q. Public, it's a very different story. Now, I will say I've talked to a lot of educators, people working in higher ed, and it's fascinating how they're using it to leverage like creating personas. So like different student personas and why would you attend this college or why would you not, like doing evaluations of your content and things that you're creating. It's fascinating how you can use it. So it's not necessarily all about like making more money or selling online courses. People are legitimately using this for their daily tasks, to help them think more strategically and to think more creatively. So that's where I get excited, is like, I remember when I first learned how to use Photoshop many,
Mhm.
many years ago when I was in college. And there was no undo. You couldn't undo an activity. There was no what we call layers. So you could layer stuff and undo
Right.
your work. Now it's almost to the point where you're going to be able to like think something and it's going to happen. And I'm like, I get excited about this because it makes it more accessible. Like AI tools, so many of them are free. This makes it so accessible. My first CMS content management system, kind of like WordPress that I used, was $150,000 a year license. And this is only 2006. Now you can pretty much do anything for under $100 or free. And so the democratization of a lot of these tools, just the accessibility, the approachability, but we also have to be willing to experiment, try things out and get comfortable with it. And so that's the thing. If I can encourage everybody to just, again, it's not your head in the sand. Yes, there's going to be, and it's not all evil. There are, of course, things. Listen, the evil stuff we don't even know about. Like that's the reality. So
Keep joking about like welcome our robot overlords,
basically, yeah. I mean,
Yeah,
yeah.
and I mean, there's so much. I mean, and there are ways I know that AI has already been in use that we haven't even realized, but
Oh, yeah. Yeah,
it's
you don't even know it's already baked into so many of like those chat responses and everything that you're talking to your healthcare company, you're doing all these things. Half of that's automated already. So, we may not want to recognize it as that, but we've already been trained for this stuff. So it's and now, I mean, how many folks do you know, especially like Gen Z, they don't want to talk to people. They want to talk to a bot. Like nobody wants to pick up the phone and talk to an actual, it's my husband's hilarious. He's like, why don't you just pick up the phone? I'm like, no, I'm going to talk to this bot. I'm going to get real angry.
I'm gonna throw my computer.
I'm gonna throw my computer. I'm gonna say some choice words at Julie, the Amtrak lady. Yeah.
That's so funny. Um, oh, there's so much more I would love to talk to you about that. Also in terms of like I'm curious what demand for real people that will actually increase for people who's like my brain is overloaded on automation and
That's where I want to play, to be honest with you, because I feel like there's this great chasm, if you will, of, so much of this stuff is automated.
Mhm.
But we still crave the, especially coming after COVID, like we both attended an event. I'm like, we're not necessarily there for like what we're going to learn at the event, which is a great byproduct. But frankly, we just want to be in the room with people that understand us, understand what we do, what we're trying to do. So I think a high touch, more intimate situations. I personally still don't want to be around huge crowds. Like I've gone to some concerts and stuff, and it's like a little jarring on the nervous system. But I will tell you, about year 2 of the pandemic, there was like a break in everything. And so we felt like we could have a dinner party. And we did this amazing dinner party at a local restaurant that has a private dining room.
Mhm.
And we brought together 12 of our friends. Most of them had never met each other. And there was somebody's wife had just come out of breast cancer treatment, literally had not seen anybody for 2 years. Somebody else had been a nurse working the COVID floor. Like we got so deep so fast. It's
Yeah.
probably one of the top meals of my life. And I get shivers thinking about it because I'm like, I just miss this kind of human connection
Yeah.
and our shared experiences. And everybody was such, we had like a record producer, we had a documentary guy, we had like the nurse, we had somebody running a dance studio, we had, just such a wide variety of folks. And the shared experience is something I still think about it like a couple of years later of like, wow, we want to, I don't know if we're gonna be able to recreate it, but there was just something so innately connecting all of us
Yeah.
that I don't think is going to go away. We're going to
I,
crave that more and more.
I agree.
Yeah.
Oh, and I can so relate to that. Just
Yeah.
and I still try not to take for granted just the joy of being in the room with other people and even
Yeah.
just knowing okay our nervous systems are regulating off of one another, we're all getting
Mhm.
synced up, our heart rates are syncing up like
Yeah.
oh I
Yeah.
love
Yeah.
being
Yeah. I
in
mean,
that.
that's what I miss about yoga. I mean, I used to be a big yogi in my 20s. And like, I remember going to a Friday night class and it would be a 2-hour class. You'd have to flip your mat because it got so soaked, but it was just like the vibe in there was so incredible. And you
Mhm.
can't get that with a half an hour pop in, pop out, or like, I still do all my video workouts, but you can't recreate that communal experience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Well, that's interesting to hear that you're seeing that that actually is an opportunity
Oh,
for
100%.
more high touch,
Yeah.
more connection.
Yeah.
Because the last thing I'll say about that is right before the pandemic hit, I was reading The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
It was such a wonderful book, and it's
Yeah.
all about meaningful gatherings. And I was like, my whole business is going to be, my marketing plan is going to be gathering in person.
I know.
Okay, maybe not.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's a component. It's really, it's still one of those hard things to get people to gather. Like, it's funny. I just spoke at a conference and I was talking about, what's easier to sell and harder to sell. And I'm like, in-person events are still one of the hardest, like trying to sell retreats, trying
Yeah,
to sell conferences is still one of the hardest things to do because it's so much easier to spend $1,000 on a course or whatever than $1,000 on a conference ticket because you're like, well, I got to take time off and I got to travel. And like, there's so many other decisions that have to be made. And
Yeah.
so, but when people do it, and you also have the guilt around taking the time off and all the other stuff or taking away from your kids. But that experience, boy, you just can't replace meeting people in person and just having, breaking bread and talking, having coffee. And, I was excited because I got to see a couple of my clients in person who I never get to see. And I'm like, it
Oh,
just,
you and
yeah,
I got to meet in person in New York. We
exactly.
had an
Yeah, yeah,
amazing
yeah.
Italian meal, and I got to meet your husband, and it was incredible.
Yeah,
It's so much
yeah.
fun and stayed up late.
That's what I want more of for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that was a joy. So,
Yeah.
yeah, awesome. Well, so okay, I want to honor your time.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, there's so much more. You've kind of answered the question I was going to ask, which like, what still surprises you about this
Yeah.
work?
Yeah.
But if there's anything you'd like to add to that,
Yeah, I think we still get tripped up and I still get tripped up, especially if I'm working with clients who make a lot more money than me or have a lot bigger list or more visibility, one little thing still can have a great impact. I just spoke at this conference last week and there was a woman in my audience who has over a couple 100,000 YouTube subscribers. And she was in my audience for my session. And she did a recap and she's like, I learned so much. And she's like, I learned this, this, and this. And I'm like, oh, this is so cool. Like I can have impact on somebody who's got such a great reach. There's still something that we can all teach each other. And, I was actually really, really excited about that because it's like I get somewhat jaded sometimes of just like, oh, everybody's heard everything, or I have nothing new to share. Like they've got this experience, like there's nothing I can help them with. But that's not the case. Like, you develop an expertise or you have a specialty in something and you're able to share that and make an impact in somebody else's business. That one little tweak for her business could probably generate a ton of revenue because she's already got these other things dialed in. She starts adding those other little components. You're just, putting the gas on the fire, So that's where I get excited is don't discount what you have to offer. Because again, we get so tripped up with the comparisonitis. If you've got a specialty and expertise, you likely have something that someone else doesn't either understand or hasn't implemented, and you can be of value to that person.
mm, that is wonderful. And I think that's a great place for us to finish up. And thank you so much for being someone who sees what the value that people have to bring and
Thank
being
you.
able to amplify that. That's huge, and you're so good at it.
Thank
So
you very much. Appreciate that.
yes,
Yeah, that's where I get joy. Yeah, for
yeah.
sure. Yeah.
Ooh, and I love that too. Just I always love to say like, let's are we having fun,
Yeah.
right? Like it's important that when we're doing the work we do, that it's lighting us up. We're
Oh,
having
yeah.
fun doing it, and it's so clear that you're enjoying what you're doing.
I
So
do. Thank you.
so much, and thank you so much for being part of my brain trust, and thank you for
Yeah.
being part of this brain trust conversation. And
Thank you.
I just can't wait. Oh, and how can people find you?
Right. So the best bet is to get on my newsletter. I call it the Nugget. It comes out every Friday. You can sign up at minimadesigns.com. So I try to share tech-based stuff that you can implement yourself, whether it's for your personal life, your business. I help folks with email marketing. I help them with design and strategy and really developing like their online presence and products. So come check me out at minimadesigns.com.
It's a very generous newsletter. You share a
Thank
lot,
you.
and I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate that. So, thank you so much, Michelle. It was
You're
so great
welcome.
to catch up with you, and I can't wait to see what's next for you.
Thank you so much. All right.
Okay. Thank you.